This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And you have arrived at the Creep Street Podcast. Welcome, one and all.
Hello. We are so happy to have you here today on a very, very special episode.
Yes, a very special episode. So we're just going to buzz through the opening housekeeping here.
Dylan, rush through it. Jesus.
Of course, like, rate, subscribe, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We also have a TikTok. And of course, if once a week is not enough, just go to patreon.com for all sorts of goodies. But Maureen, wow, today is special.
Today is very special. Today is a big ding-dang, ding-dong deal.
Maureen, who are we interviewing today?
Today we are interviewing the one and only India Oxenberg.
Yes.
Now, if you have seen The Vow, if you have watched Seduced, if you have paid attention to the NXIVM story, you know who India Oxenberg is. Her mother is Catherine Oxenberg, who wrote a book, who did a tireless media circuit in order to get her daughter India out of the NXIVM cult.
Yes. And thank God she was successful.
Yes.
India is out of the cult and thriving. She wrote a book of her own called Still Learning. Check it out. It's wonderful. We've got the book and we listened to the audiobook. She reads the audiobook herself. It's so well done.
Yeah, highly, highly recommend it. It's fascinating.
And, you know, of course, we've read her mother's book. We've read Tony Natale's book, Sarah Edmonds. We've read all the books.
We've read everything we could get our little paws on.
We've absorbed all the documentaries, and I'll tell you, it's so wild because, and we told her this before we started recording, we started following this story when she was still in the cult, when her mother was trying to get her out, so to see her go from a member to breaking free and then eventually being on the Creep Street Podcast. It's just kind of a surreal moment.
It really is. And so you do not have to have watched these documentaries or read these books to listen to this interview.
Right.
Of course, I think it is helpful, of course, as always, but it is not necessary by any means to listen to this interview. We talked to her about her time in NXIVM, but also a little bit about her life now and what she's up to now, which is really exciting. And I think it is just one hell of a ride.
So without further ado, citizens of the Milky Way, enjoy this interview with India Oxenberg. Yes, citizens of the Milky Way, we are so lucky and so honored to have a very special guest on Creep Street today. Today we are talking to India Oxenberg. India, thank you 1,000 times over for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. That's so sweet.
Oh my gosh, yes, of course.
It's so fun to get to talk to other nerds like me who really have taken the time to deep dive into this stuff. I mean, if I wasn't in this cult, I wouldn't know nearly as much about cults as I do now. So I actually feel kind of lucky because I got a whole bunch of parting gifts that I didn't expect. I mean, granted, there was a bunch of shitty ones that I left with, physical and metaphorical scarring. But at the same time, it's given me a whole new way to look at things that I didn't have before.
Right. And, obviously we know you've done countless interviews. Obviously you wrote a book, you were the lead of an incredible docuseries. So obviously we'll talk about NXIVM and stuff, but we kind of want to, we don't want to make you retread things you've talked about a billion times. We obviously want to know about Patrick, your husband. So we kind of want to know more about the India before NXIVM and the India after NXIVM, and of course we'll talk about stuff in between. But yeah, we're hoping we're hoping we don't bore you with the same questions that you've answered a million times.
I highly doubt that, but I totally appreciate it. So yeah, shoot, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I would just love to hear more about your life right now because you're living in Florida. And is that just like a whole new experience for you? What's that like?
So I'm living in the Keys right now, and it was a big decision that my husband and I made a year ago when, it was during the pandemic and we had been living in LA throughout, the coronavirus. That's where I'm from originally. And he's from the East Coast. And so we gave California a try, and then we realized quickly that it wasn't really accommodating for small business owners, unfortunately. It was quite expensive. And my husband's in the restaurant industry. He's a chef, and he's also an owner-operator of his new restaurant that's coming to the Keys, to Key West in October.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's called Eatin' Good, and it's going to be Woodfire Caribbean, but like all of these things that he wanted to do were quite difficult in LA. So we took several months to like travel around the US in our truck that we built out the back bed into a bed, and we traveled with our cats, Beans and Rice. Wow. to really kind of figure out like where the heck we wanted to live. I mean, like I had been in Albany, New York for a long time. I was definitely not going back there.
Right. No, absolutely.
And
not.
so we explored the southern roots of the US, and eventually through, a connection that he has with his now business partner, they landed on Florida as, a great opportunity for an emerging business. And so I was like, I'm from Malibu. Like I can get down with the beach and with a small town vibe. And the funny thing is, it's been such a culture shock in a lot of ways. And the irony of it is, it's because I feel safe.
Right.
And it's like, what the hell is wrong? Like, I'm not like compulsively locking my car, in LA, worried about if someone's gonna steal some shit out of it, or just like. Or like dodging, homeless people on the street to make sure that like you don't bother someone who's sleeping in front of your house. Like, it's a totally different lifestyle that I'm used to. And like we'll walk out of our home and you say like hi to people on the street, and everyone's like, how y'all doing? And I'm like, where are we?
What's going on? Yeah.
What's going on? Everyone's so nice. But like that's it's actually been really nice for me because I work remotely, so I get to enjoy like my time in my home office, then go outside, ride my bike. It's a great balance. And then I go back to LA about once a month or every other month, depending on work demands, because I've got my foundation that I run with my mother, which is the Catherine Oxenberg Foundation. So we're really hot and heavy in revamping that. We're building a website and an actual brick and mortar healing center in Malibu out of the ashes type of story, because we lost our home in the Woolsey fires in 2018. So we lost everything. So we're regenerating the land and we're rebuilding a healing center. So those are my two projects with the foundation. And then I've also got my job as a producer with STARZ. So I field premium true crime stories. So basically people who have experiences like me can come to me and can pitch their stories, and like I can let them know if I think STARZ would be a good fit for them or not. And also I coach people on like how to tell their story in an empowering way so that they don't get kind of used by the media, because it's so easy to be exploited in this world. And especially when you're raw and you're just so eager to move through whatever it is that you went through, there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of steps in between that you can protect yourself and, protect your story and protect the value of your story. So I find myself counseling people a lot in that, because I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've also, made a lot of good decisions, which were empowering for me. Right. So I'm kind of like balancing both worlds of like our nonprofit stuff and then my my production work.
Wow.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh,
It's really fun.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And we will obviously we're gonna dive more into that. I think it's so poetic that your husband's opening a new restaurant, because something that stuck out, I think, in your book and other interviews you've gave is how much food is kind of your first love, and how you kind of, before you got into NXIVM, it was really this passion of yours, and how this passion was sort of taken from you, and it's so wonderful to see you sort of come full circle, and now that passion's back in a way.
I'm so lucky for it. I mean, I had lost that love and that desire for, talk about all things pleasure related, because those were big no-nos in the cult in general. Like anything that was about the body, anything that was about pleasure really was a no-no. And like for me, cooking is so enjoyable, and also eating. And I had lost that for a long time. And I actually say that I had a cult-induced eating disorder, because it lasted for a while where like I would get into these deep depressions and food just didn't feel good. It didn't taste good. It didn't give me the feelings that I used to have. And I was like, oh my God, like what is happening? This is so uncomfortable, and this is so not me. And so really my relationship with my husband Patrick has been beautifully healing in that way, because he is a chef. Food is his whole life. He's also a hunter, so like he goes out and he spearfishes and he gets his lobsters, and he likes to bow hunt, and like all of the stuff that I think is so cool, because I was a vegetarian for many years, and I always remember balancing like my desires for food, but also the ethic behind it. And I was like, I know I don't like factory farming, but I know that I'm a meat eater. Like, and I was like, does that make me bad? And obviously, my thinking about it was convoluted in the cult, because they were heavily influencing people to have vegetarian diets. But now, like in my new life, I get to really enjoy like what I believe in, which is if you catch it yourself, like that's really awesome and way cooler to me than going to the store and buying a pack of meat, which I still do on occasion, but I really try to not. And like really just use what's locally. I mean, that's the dream, and obviously it's harder said than done, and so you have to supplement. But I think my journey with food has been pretty challenging, but also really rewarding, because it's a huge part of my life. And like one of the ways that I relax is just to cook.
Right. Now, India, what I took away that seemed to be core to the story for you was this incredible relationship between, obviously, you and your mother. And I know in your mom's book, she described herself as a seeker. She would travel the world going to temples, to ashrams. Sometimes you would accompany her on these journeys. How do you think that was an influence on you as a child growing up, your mother's sort of quest for self-betterment or knowledge or whatnot?
It was huge. I mean, I still see my mom in that light. And she's someone who, I have so much respect for my mom, because she is the type of parent that when she notices something is wrong, she will do whatever she needs to do to make it right. And like that's something that I can say wholeheartedly because of our experiences together in NXIVM. But as a child, I think like, I guess I'll go back, but like if your mom was a firefighter and she, like that was her job, and then she also had all of these extracurriculars that she did for, enjoyment, it would be totally normal to you. Like none of it would really faze you because that's your mom. The same way I feel about my mom, who also happens to be an actress and also happens to be a seeker. I'm like, that's just my mom. Like that's just that's just who she is. Like you don't even really notice it. So it's so deeply ingrained in me that it actually took me a long time to realize that I was a seeker too.
Right.
And that I was, I unfortunately was looking in the wrong direction, and then due to coercion and grooming and all the things that you guys understand very well, I was taken in a direction that was nefarious rather than a positive place for personal growth, which is what I believed that it was. So I lost that faith for a long time, especially when I was in the cult. I didn't have any connection to like my spirituality or my faith or just like the things that feed my soul, because I was pretty much becoming a shell for them. And I think one of the hardest things to get back has been my intuition and like just being able to check in with myself and be like, what what am I feeling? Because it was taken from me. And so like that compounded with my own personal growth journey and kind of that not feeling so sour and perverted anymore because it had for so long. I was like, how can I trust anybody? Like this is all snake oil. These are all charlatans. Like I kind of felt like that when I came out, and I had to really work to figure out like, what do I believe? Like what resonates with me? And that's been like a layer after layer process.
Totally.
And my mom influenced all of that because, you know, she didn't take no for an answer. And I think I have the same approach to my healing, and so does she, which is like, people will try to tell you all the time that they have the answers for you, or that, you know, you don't have the answers, or that you're like, for me, I remember when I was coming out of the cult, my mom was consulting with psychiatrists and cult experts, and they said to her, you know, you may get your daughter back physically, but you're not going to have her back mentally. And if you do get her back mentally, it will probably take her the same length of time that she was in the cult, or possibly double. So we're talking, you know, 7 to 14 years of therapy. And I had just lost all of my 20s to this cult. And when I heard that, I was like, no way. I was like, this is not going to be my life for the next 14 years. Like, I just lost so much of my life. I can't bear to think about having to live like this much longer. And so I was really pissed. And also really disheartened, because I was like, really? I'm going to be this fucking damaged for that long? And I was mad. So I think like that anger and that drive to, I guess, want to prove people wrong in a way, and really fight for myself, comes from that place, that desire to want to grow, and also to be like, wait, you don't know me. I know me, and I know what I need to heal. And so like I've had to really reestablish that voice for myself, because I didn't have it. I didn't believe in myself at all.
Now, I know you were, in your book, you say you were diagnosed at about age 8 with dyslexia, and that was a big, you know, especially when you're a child, the way you make things in your head can be so dramatic, and I know that it was a big source of discomfort for you. You said you felt stupid, you felt, you know, were these kind of emotional wounds, do you think that NXIVM was able to prey on those wounds, things like that, just like childhood trauma?
100%, that's what they did. So they were really excellent at figuring out people's vulnerabilities, and we all have them, and that was definitely a big one of mine, because I actually believed that there was something wrong with my brain, which is a really sad narrative to run, you know, in the backdrop of your life, thinking that there's constantly something wrong with you. It makes you really vulnerable to predators, because they will figure out how to show you exactly what you already feel. They'll show you that that's real. And that's like how they can move you around, because they'll say, well, I see this very vulnerability, and let me show you how I can make it better for you. But I am that vulnerable population that was looking for help. So that's somebody who can be taken advantage of. And you don't have to be, you know, young or naive to be taken by a cult. I mean, there could be a cult of one that notices that somebody has a vulnerability, and they can exploit that.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because I have always been so taken with your story, because it is so relatable. You could see how anyone could really be sucked into something like this, because you are just like such a normal person. You have your vulnerabilities like everyone does, but it's not like you are this mess of a person either. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not.
You're just like
I mean,
normal.
I come from an unusual family background, but like pretty much everybody does. Right. And like, that's like, if you look into it a little deeper, you'll find everyone's got their weird shit. But I do believe that now, especially doing a bunch of research, that like anyone could be susceptible to manipulation, or being conned, or being fooled. Right place, wrong time, whatever you want to call it. It could even be in a time of transition that all of a sudden you're just a little bit unstable, and somebody goes, oh, there's my moment. And predators and manipulative people do know what to look for. And if you're an empathetic person, you're not walking around thinking about, that person looks vulnerable. How am I going to exploit them? But that is how they think.
So I think a lot of people, if they only have like a passing knowledge of this story, NXIVM is really just kind of an umbrella, and there's all these other little companies within it. There's ESP, there's Jeunesse, there's Society of Protectors, the Rainbow School. Was ESP, from what I understand, that was kind of like the gateway drug. That was kind of where most people kind of first start off, right?
Yeah, I look at it a little differently. I kind of like to say that ESP is the consumer front product and NXIVM is the umbrella, because it is, and I like that you say that it's the gateway drug, because it was their easiest pill to swallow, if you will. Right. Because it wasn't that offensive, you know? Like we're talking about executive courses to make your life better, and everyone's like, ooh, you know, like it's not like, you know, red flags all over the place like some of these other cults that I've had to research these past couple of years for my job. They're pretty fringe, like right up front. I mean, you're talking about One Taste, you're talking about the O cults, you're talking about all of these groups that are very alternative and forward about their, I guess, darker side of things. Right. NXIVM was really, like, the NXIVM founders were really good at keeping themselves concealed from the initial student population, and that was part of their strategy. So, like, a student would come in, and sometimes a student would come in and they would leave a 5-day course and they would be like, that was awesome, thanks, that's all I needed. Those were not the people that they were targeting. They got money from them, obviously, and that's what they wanted. But what they really wanted were folks who were going to start their coaching program. Because that meant that they were going to be a part of the community. That meant that they were then going to have to recruit other people. That also meant that they were going to go through extensive, repetitive indoctrination on top of the education that they were already required to take. So I was kind of screwed because they targeted me to be a coach, and I was young and I was susceptible to this new community that was welcoming me, and I felt special and smart and like that they understood me, and like all of my little cracks inside of me were feeling like they were being filled by this community. I just didn't realize the undercurrent of what was actually really happening.
Right. And that's what I noticed too, and this is so true with so many cults, is that when you first look into it, if you don't really look into it super deep, it sounds great at first. Yeah, you know,
it has to.
Oh, this sounds like an awesome idea. Like, you know, ESP at first, I'm sure there were some actual valuable things that you were learning in there. And then next thing you know, you're sucked in. It's like, it's so easy for that to happen.
Yeah, it is. And it happens a lot more than people think.
Yeah.
Totally.
Can you remember, is there a specific moment where you feel like the trap was set? Like where during an ESP meeting when you first felt like, oh wow, like when it really touched you for the first time and it kind of hooked you? Was there one specific moment?
There were so many moments, but I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because one moment I really remember strongly was pretty early on. I think I had only been a coach for maybe a year, and I was sort of waffling between continuing to do my production work and then feeling the pressure and a lot of guilt to be a better teammate on the ESP side of things. And at the time, Mark Vicente was running a center in LA, and he really needed coaches, and I was kind of like their local, pretty much. Everyone else had come from somewhere else, more or less. Right. So they were really attached to me because I think they knew that they were going to use my network. And so, because I was local, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like, you kind of just need somebody who knows the lay of the land, and it's like, oh, I know that person, let me introduce you. And I was wholeheartedly that person. But I remember I was coming back from Belgrade, Serbia, after working on a production when I was 21 years old. And I remember feeling like I could continue to do this, or I could commit to ESP. And that was the ultimatum that they were actually giving me at the time. They're like, you either need to be all in or you're never going to grow. And I was like, oh my God, I can't sacrifice this. Like, I've got to grow. I can't. Right. Like, they really had me right where they needed me. And I remember feeling like I don't have the option to say no to this, because if I do, I'm going to lose all my friends. I'm going to lose like all the work that I've been doing. And so the pressure was building for me to not be able to say no. And then, I mean, talk about really closing the trap door was when I was recruited into DOS and I had to give over collateral. And then, I mean, it was really over. But that was a five-year period. And even within that 5-year period, I still felt like I couldn't leave because of the amount of information they had on me. And also just the way that they related with us was so like dominating, and it made you feel like you didn't have choice, which is really sad to look at. Like when I look back at myself there, I'm like, wow, I really couldn't have done it any differently, because like people had said to me after I left, they're like, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just leave? And I'm like, it's not that simple. Like people don't understand like the invisible chains of a coercive and abusive or predatory type of group. I mean, like, they know how to play you.
Right. Totally. And it really reminds me a lot of an abusive relationship, too, with just one other person. You know, it really reminds me of that, where it's like you've put all this time and energy into this person or this group, however you're thinking of it. And it's hard to walk away because you've put all of this time and energy into it. And like, what are you supposed to do? And they, you know, you were connected with so many friends that way. And
and they've also eroded your confidence in like, and your ability to feel like you have any fruition in your own life. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I actually liken it a lot to an abusive relationship. That's why I even say it could be a cult of one. And that's not my term. That's used by experts. Takes the average woman 7 times to leave in an abusive relationship. Now imagine that on steroids, like with a whole group that you've now, you know, that's become your surrogate family. That's really difficult to leave. Like, I mean, I work with a couple other women just like on the advocacy side for cult survivors and victims of sexual violence. And one of the women that I have the privilege to work with is a woman named Sochel Martin, who was in a group called LDM, which is a really big religious cult. She's 4th generation cult. Do you know how hard it would be to leave 4 generations of something that your family has believed in? I mean, like, she's so brave. She's one of my heroes in that way, because I look at my life and I was, you know, from 19 to my late 20s. It's pretty profound time in one's life to get to know yourself. Now imagine not having any outside experience of who you are besides who you were in the cult. Like, it takes a lot of bravery.
I find that the time period when you were in Belgrade working on that film, I find that time period so fascinating, because in a weird way, they were already playing a game of, because your mother kind of wanted you to go, she was already kind of trying to separate you from the cult. And the cult was also trying to keep you. It was really, it's interesting. It's almost like an intricate game of chess in a way. There was already a game going on.
Yeah, they already knew that she was a threat. Because they also knew that I love my family. I am a family-oriented person. I'm a homebody. Like, I love my family, and they were already telling me that my love and my dependency from my family was going to keep me from growing. Right. So they were pitting me against my values, and that's really a very, very basic cult strategy, which is anything that interferes with your loyalty to the cult is a threat. And that happened to be my mom.
Well, and I think it's another thing that's so interesting is your grandmother she was able to just smell a rat right away.
Yes.
And I think in your mother's book, when she brought your stepfather Casper to one of the volleyball nights, and right away he was like, hey, they're all sleeping with him. He could call it right away.
Yeah.
What do you think it is? What qualities maybe did your stepfather have, your grandmother have, that they were able to sort of see those red flags right away?
I'll speak to my grandmother's perspective because I've talked to her about it more. And my grandma is a really unique woman. I mean, she grew up in World War II. She had to escape from her country when, you know, Nazis were coming through, and she also grew up a royal. So like that comes with a whole layer of intricacies and complications in itself, and then to be exiled on top of it, and then kind of be like countryless and not be able to return to her country because of communism. and a whole series of other factors until, late 90s, early 2000s. So I think she's lived a very unique life that has given her a lot of perspective that most people wouldn't have to really probably the horrors of life. Yeah. So I think talk about, having your trauma become your wisdom. It really does if you don't let it consume you. Right. If it doesn't destroy your psyche, it can become your greatest asset. So I think my grandma has a really great, keen filter for bullshit and for fraudulence. And she's great at that. And so I think that's one of her gifts, but from having a difficult life.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And it's so interesting to see how your grandmother's life and your mother's life have impacted your life as well, and how you see things too. And it's so interesting and really beautiful to see how now you are kind of following in their footsteps in that way, where now you realize that what you've gone through, of course, is horrible and wouldn't repeat it, but you've learned so much about yourself, and you have come out the other side so strong and
thank you,
independent. And yeah, it's just true. I just think it's just worth pointing out.
Thanks. I feel like they really are my heroes in a lot of ways, and my personal inspiration, because they're both, philanthropists. They're both really graceful women who conduct themselves uniquely in the world, and I definitely try to model myself after them. I'd say I'm a little bit more homegrown, a little bit more of a wild Mowgli child.
Right.
Than them. I like to call my mom a fancy hippie.
Yes.
But that's part of their charm too. So I have learned a lot from them, and I feel like somebody told me when I was at one of my lower points where I really was feeling like I couldn't get out of the depression, and sort of the sadness was so consuming. I was like, why did this happen to me? It was so hard to really wrap my head around the fact that these people who I had believed for so many years were my friends were actually not. In an extreme way, went to prison for 120 years. And so that was such a challenging pill to swallow. But it also really helped me see that I did come from strong stock, because a lot of these things would normally break somebody. Like when I was thrown into the media without, my consent, I was not a Jane Doe. I was India Oxenberg branded sex slave. I was like, how am I gonna come back from this? My Google profile was horrific, and I really thought, thank God I have a boyfriend who is now my husband, because nobody's gonna want to date me. I was like, they're gonna be like, whoa, no thanks, not taking this baggage on. But also at the same time, I remember having that moment of wait, no, this is not gonna break me. I know who I am, and I am much more than that. And so it kind of motivated me, and I guess that courage or that drive definitely comes from my mom and my grandma.
Hell yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, girl power.
Yes.
How long were you in ESP until your very first night at the sports barn, the late night volleyball, and kind
the first time I met Keith?
Yeah, how long were you in it until you met Keith? And then kind of walk us through the process of the volleyball night. You go, it's obvious because they do it at the middle of the night.
We're fascinated by the volleyball.
We're fascinated by the volleyball night.
Volleyball is a fucking chore. I hated it. And I actually played volleyball in high school, and so I would say I played volleyball because I love volleyball, but I was like, I don't want to play with you guys.
Right.
They were really aggressive. It was pretty much a guys frat house squad that they would play, and then they had an A team and a B team, and the B team, the B's were basically like us fooling around playing, and everyone who played with Keith had to be serious and aggressive. But I thought it was really dumb, and I thought it was annoying, and I thought it was weird that everyone had to sit around and wait for Keith and then wait until the wee hours of the morning to ask him questions. But at the same time, I was like, well, I guess that's kind of respectful, because, if the guy does all this work to make us better, then I guess what's a couple hours waiting around to ask him a question? But I really just, didn't ever have questions for him.
Right.
Because I thought that the fucking classes were pretty well explained. So and so I was like, I don't really, like, I didn't come to NXIVM for Keith, but, like, some people did. They liked
Right.
the allure of the smartest man in the world, and we're going to get to chat with him. And I was like, I've met a lot of smart people in my life, and, like, I'm generally not starstruck unless, like, you're Dolly Parton or something.
Right.
But,
Oh, yeah,
but otherwise, I wasn't really there for him. And I remember feeling that way because I had only been in NXIVM for about 6 months when I went to Albany. From the time that I took my first 5-day to the time when I was finishing my 16-day, which is why people would even go to Albany, because
Right.
they didn't really offer the rest of the trainings anywhere else. They're like, come to Albany and we'll see if we can lure you in, basically. Now, in retrospect, and like they're like, if we can get these fools all the way over here to this this shitty neighborhood, then maybe we've got them. Like,
Right.
red flag. But yeah, if anyone tells you to come to upstate New York and, like, you know, sell your soul to the devil, don't do it.
Don't do
But,
it.
yeah, don't do it. But I think things really started to change for me about how I felt with Keith when I was in DOS. Because that's really where the grooming and the, like, reverential indoctrination went into high gear. And so then we were forced to go to volleyball, so we had to wait around and had to be there. And then on top of it, we were told we had to look happy. It didn't matter if we were fucking starving, or if we were cold, or if it was 2 a.m., or if we were sleep deprived, or if we had a penance. You still had to look happy because you weren't allowed to allude to any unhappiness. So it was forced, it was annoying, and it was often a punishment when we were in DOS to go to volleyball. So most people would be going there, like, as a student because they were curious to meet Keith, to see him play. Other people actually genuinely wanted to play volleyball. Other people really were devoted to him like a guru, and, you know, sitting around waiting with little bags of candy to ask him a question about anything, like, that was going on in their lives, and then they would take it to heart. And that's kind of how we were trained.
Now, and you say it yourself in the book, when you first see him, I mean, he's not an impressive person to look at. He's kind of short. He's not really a good-looking guy.
What do you say he looks like?
Teddy Graham.
I think
It's like a Teddy Graham, yes.
yeah, that's right. That's what you say. Yeah, I always described him as like one of those Koopas that Mario jumps on when they don't have a shell on or something.
I can see that.
And I think what's so fascinating about him is you look at him and it's like, even if he was incredibly smart and intelligent, how did he pull this off? And not even with NXIVM, but with, like, Consumer's Byline back in the day when he was running, you know, pyramid schemes and whatnot.
Yeah.
Something that fascinates me is when you hear about that first meeting he had with Nancy. When Nancy went in, and Nancy already came from a background of neuro-linguistic programming. She goes into this saying, oh yeah, this guy sounds like a sociopath, but then comes out of this meeting and she's totally swept up with it. Part of me almost, like, wishes I could have a one-on-one conversation with him just so I could see that moment where, like, the vent, like,
you would be unimpressed. Yeah, because you're an intelligent, logical fellow, I can tell. He likes to talk in circles and doesn't give answers, and really mostly just wants to hear himself talk. And I found myself intrigued by him, but mostly because of the propaganda that was, you know, set in place even before I arrived in Albany. Like, They do a really good job at, like, preemptively setting you up so that you feel a certain way about him and about Nancy and about the organization. That's really strategic. But he's not that smart. He's manipulative, and, like, there's an intelligence in manipulation, especially if you're a sociopath, because you're not reading people's feelings. You're really kind of strategizing about how to move this person in the way that you want to move them. So that takes an intelligence. I'm not going to say that the guy's, like, a total dumbass, but he's not innovative or creative whatsoever. I mean, he pretty much stole everything that he did from other modalities. And the guy even said to me several times, he never even finished a whole book. So, like, yeah, and I would be like, wow, are you dyslexic too? Like, I was just like, okay, cool. But not very impressive intellectually, and not someone who is honest. And I think, like, it's easy for someone like that to get what they want because they don't have a problem with lying.
Yeah.
And he clearly has these weird obsessions that he kind of forces on other people. For one, the volleyball, but the one that fascinates us the most.
Oh my God.
And we have always wanted to ask, what's the deal with Simply Human, this obsession with a cappella? Were you ever approached to be in Simply Human? And it's one of those things, we're not making fun of a cappella. Like,
if you
No,
want
I
to sing
actually
a
love
cappella,
acapella.
Yeah,
Right.
no, yeah, we're like
It's-
into it, like God bless. But it's just so funny that it's like this obsession. It's
right.
just so fascinating.
It's like if you were to find out that Jeffrey Dahmer really liked to do needlepoint. It's like, what? It's just,
Oh my
it's this,
God, you guys are funny.
it's this like weird
It's
side
so true.
obsession. What do you think
Yeah.
it was about the Simply Human thing? Were you ever approached to be in it? What was the
I was
deal with
not,
that?
actually, and I was pretty hurt that I was never approached to be in it, but I didn't sing when I was in NXIVM, and I sing on my own now,
Oh,
and
cool.
I sing and paint and dance and do all of these fun things for self-expression now, but I didn't do any of that then because you would have been totally scrutinized and ridiculed if you weren't perfect. But really, I think the reason for his weird obsessive quirks is his ego. So like he thinks that he is great at all of these things when really he had a bunch of fucking professional musicians who he then roped in to getting coached by him because he said, I'm a performance specialist and I'm going to enhance your ability to express, when really, I mean, these are trained actors who
Right.
also happen to be singers. So like he didn't really have to do that much work. He just put them on a very regimented protocol because he wanted to control whatever he could control, and he wanted to feel like he had power wherever he could assert power. And I think Simply Human was one of those places. It's like you can't express for pure joy, but you can express for Vanguard.
right.
You know?
That's so interesting. And that totally makes sense that it's like, instead of it being about joy, it's for him. I didn't think about it like
Yes.
that, but that totally makes sense.
It's a mind fuck. When you really try to understand the mind of a sociopath, you have to put away all of your ways of doing the world and look at it in an entirely different way. It's scary sometimes because they do think differently than us, but not all sociopaths are at the level of a Keith or a Jeffrey Dahmer, for that instance.
Right,
like
right.
there's a lot of folks out there who struggle to feel empathy, but they're not all trying to hurt you. They
Right.
just think and do the world differently than someone who might be more of an empath or more of an emotional person. So like because we project, and like these are all ironically things I learned in NXIVM, but like because we project, we sometimes don't see other people's nuances because we're just projecting what we do. So like
Right.
me projecting the shit all over Keith like he's this empathetic humanitarian was absolutely bonkers wrong.
Right.
Now I know this.
Right now, now it's so easy to see it now, like, oh
Yeah.
of course that's the case, but at the time I'm sure he seemed like he really was that type of person where that you could trust and that
I thought so.
yeah.
Now, this is obviously something you've talked about numerous times, and they cover it very well in Seduced, but V Week. This is sort of the NXIVM Coachella. It's the big thing. It celebrates his birthday, and, it lasts, I think, what was it, up to 10 days?
11 was the last.
Oh, 11.
11.
Good Lord.
Wow.
It was
Now-
so long.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Obviously, this is something you've talked about so much, but this kind of walk us through what the whole ceremony of V Week was and really its ultimate purpose.
I mean, the ultimate purpose, we're back at the same place. It's really for Keith.
Right.
Everything is for Keith. And so it was very much a celebration for him. Like, how much could he inconvenience people? How much could he get people to do for him for free?
Yeah.
Or, spending their own money. How much could he, indoctrinate people? The V Week itself was a pretty rigorous educational opportunity for the NXIVM folks because they were really focused on trainings, keeping people really tired, making sure that people were always doing an activity of sorts. They used to promote it as like the summer camp for adults or like a joyful summer camp. But really, it was not that. It was exhausting, and sure, we were in nature, which was awesome for me because I love nature, and I used to run up a mountain just to have some alone time because I'm an introvert, and it was like hundreds of people around you all the time, and I was like, get me out of here, but I had to pretend that I liked that too. So, I mean, there were definitely fun moments, but there had to be fun moments or else nobody would come.
Right. Now, you mentioned you did a lot of work. One of the sort of NXIVM sort of offshoots was the Rainbow School. And it was something when you initially got in, you were very passionate about. What, in your mind, was the goal of the Rainbow School? And now that you're out of it, what do you think was the nefarious purpose, the Rainbow School?
This is so rough to me because I love children. I'm really big on education and children and protecting children, and like that's a lot of what our foundation is focused on is early childhood trauma.
Right.
So for me, I really believed that what we were doing was something beautiful and transformational when it came to education because they incorporated multiple languages, and I thought that was so cool. Wow, all these kids are going to be like a citizen of the world, and that's like how they pitched it. And so they really hooked my heart there because I believe so strongly in the fundamentals of children's education to really be like the setting up of the rest of your life. And what I know now about how it was run and what was really going on is horrible because I think it was sociopath training in certain ways because they wanted the children to be disconnected from the mothers and then to go from person to person without establishing deep relationships with people. So yeah, you were stimulating their brains with multiple languages, but you were also kind of fucking with their EQ. And so their emotional intelligence was being tampered with.
Right.
The same way that the adults were. So that was so sad for me, and I mean, like, I've made a lot of amends there and really apologized to people. Thank God it was not successful, because if it was, it would have hurt more people.
Wow. Yeah. That's so hard. You go in with the best intentions and you just, oh God, that's a nightmare.
So life outside now. What has your relationship been like with the other survivors? I know you were a guest on Sarah and Nippy's podcast. What is your relationship like now with the other survivors, Mark, Bonnie, all those folks?
You know, for my own mental health and just general well-being, I've really tried to separate myself as much as I can from any NXIVM drama or, you know, things that come up in the media and whatnot. And I really try to just keep a neutral stance, which is that I support anyone who is brave enough to leave a cult, because I think that that is a huge step in taking your life back in your own hands. So I have the utmost respect for all of those people that you mentioned who have left and who are whistleblowers and who are out there, you know, bringing awareness to these issues and letting people learn through their stories. It's brave. So I do keep distance. I wouldn't say like I'm talking to these people on a regular basis, but I also work with an extensive group of other cult survivors who have had similar experiences to me. And so like I work with them one-on-one, more like a peer. And, you know, it's a huge part of my life. It will always be a big, significant experience that I had in my life, but it's not my everything. Right. It's just, it has informed me on what I want to do next.
I guess as a closing question, because of your experiences, I'm sure you now kind of have a sixth sense for cult tactics. And we kind of see it everywhere. We see it in our politics, in our pop culture. And I know you said for STARZ, you've been researching other groups. Are there any groups right now that have caught in your eye, that are on your radar, that maybe haven't become widely known yet, that you think people should watch out for?
Sadly, too many.
Yeah.
That's the real truth. So like you said, I have developed a sixth sense for these things. I have a really keen smell for bad behavior. I can just see it now because I've been on the inside, I've been on the outside, I've been brainwashed, I've unbrainwashed myself. Like, I can see it from multiple angles. I have respect for those who are in. I understand why they're there. I understand why they think they can't get out. I have respect for those who can get out and are willing to, you know, start a new life, knowing that maybe they were wrong about certain decisions or that they were manipulated or fooled. It takes a lot to, you know, recognize that you've made mistakes. And then also then to go through with repairing those mistakes in whatever way that is in your life, personal or publicly. So I think there's too many. That's the sad truth, and it's just about being vigilant and kind of not living in fear, but also recognizing that these groups do exist. And if you see the signs and you feel those instincts and there's a red flag, like, note it. Don't ignore it.
Totally.
All right, citizens of the Milky Way, that's going to wrap it up, our interview with India Oxenberg. India, we cannot thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. I haven't laughed this much on a podcast in a long time.
Yay, we're so happy to hear that.
Yay, citizens of the Milky Way, I love you.
Oh, yay.
That's so great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Whoa.
What an incredible interview. And let me tell you something. There was a lot of stuff we didn't have time to get to.
I know. We were just full of questions for good old India. If we had a full 24 hours, it wouldn't have been enough. You know what I mean?
Truly. And that was the case. I knew going into this, we would not be able to get all that. Because even if she had all the time in the world, there was no way. There was things we wanted to ask her about the dossier project, some of the remaining believers that are still in, what her thoughts were on that. A lot of stuff. But God, I'm so happy with what we were able to get. And India, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, we can't thank you enough. It really, truly means the world. We're so grateful for everything that you've done for us and just for the wider cult survivor network in general. We are just so happy to have met you and to have had the opportunity to chat with you for a little bit.
Yes, hopefully we'll have her on again soon.
Yes.
All right, folks. Well, I got a list of names that are a part of the Creep Street Cult.
Oh, God.
Folks, the names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream, James Watkins, the Finnish Face, Fiat Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid, Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bonebreaker, Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool, Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude, Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand, Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud, Carl Staub, the Firestarter, Heather Carter, the Conqueror, Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, and a newcomer. Give it on up for the ghoulish Gert Hankong.
Wow. Thank you so much to everyone who donates to our Patreon. We are so grateful for you, and we're just grateful for all you listeners. You know, we're lucky to have you. What can I say?
It's absolutely true. Once again, thank you to India Oxenberg for her time. Thank you to all of Creep Street for making it possible.
Truly, we couldn't do it without you.
We couldn't interview her without you. It's true. It's truly, that is the truth. So we thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. Can't wait to keep on creeping on.
That's right. We'd just be two freaks screaming into microphones.
Hell yeah.
If it weren't for you all.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.